Welcome back to the channel. Ole here, and in today's video we're going to be taking off the guts from the old frame, the first drone I ever built. I broke this, so we're going to be taking off the guts, putting it on the new frame, which is exactly the same frame. There's a few upgrades that I've made and a few build upgrades, well, changes that I want to make while I'm building the new frame. But pretty much the damage that happened here was a broken frame. The motor is broken because the wire got ripped out of the motor windings. The receiver antennas for the XM Plus receiver were broken. One of them actually came off, actually one only broke, but it came off of the connector that connects to the actual receiver. So I need to get a new receiver, and I've wanted to upgrade, so I actually went ahead and got the TBS tracer, which I was gonna go with the Crossfire initially, but I went with the tracer. I don't go super long range, so I think this will do very well for me. So I have the little antennas, which I actually super glued the antenna onto this TPU print for the actual video antenna. If it zooms in, there we go. There you go. And I'll link a file to these prints if you have a 3D printer and you want to print it. I also got this buzzer and LED little piece which solders onto the flight controller, and I printed this little mount over here, so if you guys want to get that, I'll also link that in the description. And I think that was it. The buzzer and LED, the motor, the frame, and the antennas, which we got a whole new receiver for. I'm actually excited for that upgrade, that TBS tracer. Alright, so first thing we're going to do here is we're going to take off all our screws from the frame for the stack and for your motors, and get all these guts off, and then we're going to go ahead and start installing them onto this frame. Alright, now everything is loose, so we can actually take all this carefully off of the screws here. Well, actually, before I do that, I have some zip ties here that are zip tied to the actual frame over here, the capacitor and the receiver. So I'm gonna have to cut these real quick. Alright, get this receiver out of here. There we go. I made this little connector from wires and from the Arduino kit that I had, and then I just kind of push it in the receiver. I have little pins on it. Makes it easy to swap, I guess, but I didn't have another one to swap with. So let's see, let's pull this guy off, the flight controller. Be careful not to rip anything out. I'm gonna actually unplug the flight controller from the ESC board. Oh, we got a loose gummy here. Make sure I don't lose any of these gummies. Alright, another zip tie. And I actually had this wire short out on me before. I have a video on that actually. I actually recorded when I plugged in the battery. It shorted right here by the XT60 connector. So that's here we go. This is our little skeleton, drone skeleton here that we're gonna be putting onto the new frame. I just wanna get all these screws, and these screws that I have here in the middle of the frame that hold up my stack, they're super long. They're way longer than what came with that frame, so I'm gonna actually use these on the new frame. So I'm gonna go ahead and unscrew those out of the frame. So I actually, the reason I got the TBS tracer really is because before I had the cable a while ago. I had this cable for the video antenna break on me, and I had really bad video transmission, and I was flying with EV100 goggles, but I wasn't using the internal receiver. I was actually flying on the Eachine 58 Pro, I believe it's called, and I had really bad video. Like, I couldn't really fly that far away from me, and I'd get really bad interference. So what I did was I ordered myself a rapid fire module, and now when I go out and fly, I actually found that cable, and then the Eachine receiver was way better after that, but the rapid fire was already on its way, so I decided to get that. And then when I was flying, I ended up like flying really far to where I would get a very low RSSI signal from my transmitter here, and I was afraid that I would fail safe because my video was great. So I ended up buying the tracer. So there we go. We got our skeleton off. We got everything we need. We got our screws off the frame. So now let's go ahead and put everything onto the new frame. So I was planning to actually mount this sideways because I wanted this to be on the side, right? But then when I really thought about it, I would have to resolder quite a few wires on the flight controller in order for them to reach, if I had to turn it as well, because the connector from the ESC board to the flight controller is actually too short for me to connect without turning the flight controller. So I'm gonna have to mount the ESCs just the way they were, with the XT60 connector coming out of the back. So that means that the room that I was hoping to put my receiver on won't really be available, but I'll just put my receiver on top of here with a zip tie, probably just like I did in the previous build. So for now, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna screw in all the screws and these landing skid pads, whatever you wanna call them, to the frame, and then I'm gonna start up the soldering iron so we can get these wires over here desoldered. Is that gonna focus? There we go. We're gonna get these desoldered, and then we're gonna put on the new motor and solder in the new wires. Okay, so that's that. I'm not gonna throw these gummies on there because I don't want to burn them while I'm soldering, but let's get rid of these. That's one. Don't want to burn this connector either. That would be bad. Actually, speaking of this connector, so the flight controller came with two of these, one shorter and this is the longer one. And when I was building this quad, I had the craziest issue that was driving me crazy, which was that one of the motors wasn't spinning at all. Like, even when you turn your quad on and it does the initial boot and it makes them twitch a little bit, three of them would be twitching and the other one wouldn't move at all. So I had no idea what was going on. But it happened to be these one of these wires in this connector from the ESC that I guess went bad, and so that motor wasn't working at all. So next, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna kind of see how long I need these wires to be, and I'm gonna put tape later over here to hold these wires down against the frame. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut these so I can solder them without them having too much slack. And then I'm gonna do that to all three of them. So let's just go ahead, put a little bit of Alright, so I'm just gonna add a little bit to here. There we go. Maybe even a little to the wires. Tin these a little bit, it'll be easier to solder them on. You don't need a lot. Should really be using a fan when you solder so you don't breathe in the fumes. I'm gonna have to add a little more though, just because, actually, I guess that's enough. Yeah, that's fine. That's one. Ow, the wire gets hot. You should really use like needle nose pliers or something to hold these wires when soldering them down, because it gets a little hot. But I'm just doing it real quick, so it's whatever. There we go. So we got our new motor soldered down. So now I'm gonna go ahead and tape some electrical tape over these wires here to protect them from the props when you're flying, and then we'll move on. Alright, so next we got our motors in. Next I'm gonna throw on the gummies onto these standoffs, and on top of that we're gonna put the flight controller. And you know, I should have ordered 2 motors, because one of these motors I had the insulation kind of on one of the wires kind of showing the actual conductor, and so I threw some electrical tape on it and it's fine. But you know, since I'm already like taking it apart and working on it, could have been nice to actually just replace that motor altogether as well, but that's fine. Alright, so the VTX is gonna go here again, right on the back, just like that. And the VTX actually came with this little, can't you see, it's shining, kind of reflecting, this little clear see-through plate here. It came with the VTX, so when the VTX gets hot, it doesn't actually touch the metal of the carbon fiber of the frame. So I'm gonna go ahead and mount this VTX. Tuck this to the side, throw the VTX on, throw on 2 more gummies on top, and then tighten it all down with a nut. Alright, so we got our VTX on. Let me just get these in nice and tight, because it's kind of hard to get them on by hand. So it's better to just hold the nut and then just take a driver and screw it in like that. And make sure it's nice and tight. You don't want your VTX kind of, you know, wobbling around there. I don't think it'll affect it too much, but still. Alright, so we got our VTX in. Next, I'm gonna put in this LED and buzzer thing. And if you guys want, as I said, link to the file in the description if you want to 3D print it, if you have a 3D printer. Also with these, I had one before that broke on me, and this is the second one that broke. So what I did is I actually desoldered the buzzer. Well, focus. I desoldered the buzzer, and then I put a little hot glue down, and then I pressed the buzzer in. That way I have a little layer of hot glue in between the board and the buzzer, so it has a little more strength. So the way you just pop this on, just like that, and it kind of just sits back there, like so. And then with the antenna, you pop that over the top. Also, the file will be in the description. And I glued the TBS antenna to the back, as you can see. And that's kind of how it sits. It's pretty cool. And then on top, I throw on these little washers that I printed from TPU. and these are a millimeter smaller in diameter than what's on the buzzer print and the antenna print. So they kind of hold everything down, and then you put the top plate of the frame on top, screw everything down. So it sits pretty nicely. Here's what it looks like all together. Let me just focus that. There we go. It's white, so it might be a little hard to see, but that's what it looks like. So if you guys want to set that up on your quad, go ahead and download those files, print it, and there you go. So that's that. Hopefully this antenna stays. I just glued it with some hot glue, but it seems pretty sturdy right now. So hopefully it doesn't come off within a crash. Now the receiver for the TBS tracer actually comes with antenna diversity, so you get 2 antennas. You can mount one horizontally, one vertically. So that's going to be my horizontal one, and I haven't really decided where I'm going to put the vertical one yet. So I guess that would be like one of the last things I do. But I know it's going to be somewhere back here. So for now, let's get this receiver soldered up. And also we need to get the buzzer soldered up. So I'm going to have to take this antenna back off. See, these top pieces are actually hard to get off with your fingers, so they hold everything together real nice. So I'm going to take this antenna off, take the buzzer off. I got to solder everything together, and the solder points are right up here, so it actually works well when you put it on. It's right up top here, so you can just reach with the wires over and go ahead and connect it. And these wires are actually long enough, so that's awesome because I did not think they were going to be long enough. So I'm going to go ahead and get this done first. Alright, I got all the wires soldered on the LED and buzzer here. Kind of got the TPU a little burnt. But next, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to spin this to get the wires a little twisted. And then put this down here, and hopefully it's long enough. Yeah, it seems good. Alright, that's a good sign. So that's going to be long enough for us. And I made this especially with kind of a little offset here. You can see there's a little room right here. That way I can have the wires running under for the antennas and the buzzer and LED. So let's go. Well, first of all, I loosened this up, so let's screw these screws a little tighter. That way the buzzer PCB is on the actual TPU print. And now let's put on the antenna and see how that looks. Okay, it's a little tight, I think, here. No, I mean, they're long enough. And if it's tight, you can always just unwind a little bit to give yourself a little more slack. There we go. Now I have some slack, so I feel a little better putting that on now. There we go. The top goes on nicely. Let's see what happened. I heard a little pop. Something come off? No, the wires are still good. Alright. Antenna. Print. On. Yeah, that looks good. I like that. And now we have to put on this receiver and to solder it to the flight controller. This is the TBS tracer receiver. And I also got to figure out where I'm going to mount this antenna. I want to mount this one vertically, but I haven't picked the spot for it. So that's going to be something to think about. So we'll figure that out soon. Since I have wire that came with the receiver, I'm gonna actually take this off, which I used for the XM Plus. So let's get the iron and quickly take these 3 off. Alright, so we got the yellow, which is the S bus. Well, that was easy. red for 5 volts, and black for ground. Alright, so I want to go ahead and get the wires for the receiver. We're going to solder that on, and we'll find a spot for this receiver. I'm thinking exactly where the old one was, which was right here. And I just zip tie it to the XT60. Or I can, I don't really want to put it on the video transmitter because it gets warm. And I don't have enough room in the front for sure because of the camera. So the camera is going to be like here. Yeah, don't have enough room. Plus, the antennas wouldn't even reach if it was in the front. So I need to have it somewhere here. Maybe I'll mount it I'll put a little bit of double-sided tape over on the flight controller here, and then put the receiver right here, and that's just enough for the antennas to reach. So we'll see if that works out. At this point, I am ready to install the receiver. I pre-soldered the power and transmit and receive wires onto the receiver itself. So now we just need to find where on the flight controller. I gotta solder these two. So I have the Mamba F405 right here. So as you can see, once this guy focuses, we have some TX and RX pads with 5V and ground right here. So I'm gonna use this TX3 and RX3, which is right here, and I'm planning on getting some double-sided tape like so and putting it on the flight controller up here, and then just mounting the receiver right on top of that. And I think I'm gonna double layer the tape, that way I have a little clearance between the flight controller and the receiver. So here's RX, here's TX, and be a little generous with the solder when you're doing this also. Should have mentioned this when we started soldering. It'll help you if you give it more solder so it's a bigger bubble. It'll help you when you're actually connecting the wires. So there we go. Could use a little bit more on this one here. Oh, alright, so look, I just bridged 2 points. Let's see. See right here? I just bridged these two. And the way to kind of undo this is just take your soldering iron and just swipe in between the points and just try to get some of the solder off. There you go. You see? Now they're good. Right there. Now you can see all 4 of them. So if you ever do bridge 2 points together, don't worry, it's not the end of the world. You could very easily undo your mistake. Alright, so now we're going to have to measure out how long we want these wires to be. So my antenna is gonna, let's see, let's get it around this XT60. That XT60 is gonna be here, so the cable is gonna be like that. And then I'm gonna mount my receiver somewhere right here, and then connect the antenna right here. Alright, so we got ground first. Then we have our 5 volts. I'm gonna cut this just a little bit. Seems a little too long for me. I don't want them to stick out. Alright, there's the 5 volts. And now what do we have here? We have TX then RX. So one thing, most of you probably already know this, but if you didn't, in order for the receiver and the transmitter, the receiver and the flight controller to communicate, the RX and TX pads on both, so you have to go from the TX on the receiver to the RX of the flight controller and from the TX of the flight controller to the RX of the receiver. This is pretty much saying receivers talking, flight controllers listening, and then flight controllers listening, receivers talking. So you don't want to connect TX to TX and RX to RX, because then it's like both of them are listening at the same time, nobody's talking, or both of them are talking and nobody's listening. And on the actual receiver, it goes ground 5 volts, and then it goes TX, then RX. So yellow is our TX, and we're going to connect that to the RX on our flight controller. Make that a little shorter. And the RX is the last pad. So we're gonna go ahead, skip one, and go to the last one, like so. And then here's the last wire. All right, there we go. So let me give you guys a closer look at what we did here. So there you go, we got all 3 of them soldered in. And actually, let me just fix this one over here is a little bit to the side. If you ever have strands sticking out from your wires like that, try to fix it, just because they could easily stick out far enough to jump over to the next little point and short something out. So just be careful with that. And always, if you do have a meter, just check all of your soldering work, just to make sure that we don't have any shorts here. So what I'm gonna do is just check between all these points. Alright, so we're good. See, if they are connected, you would have a beep. If you don't know how to use a meter, there's a lot of videos out there on YouTube, so go ahead and look that up. Alright, so we got the receiver in connected. Let me connect this antenna to it now. Now we got both antennas connected. There we go. Now I'm going to take a little bit of double-sided tape, just enough to put on the bottom of the receiver here. Another piece of double-sided tape here. Stick that on like so. There we go. Now I have a little bit of 2 layers, so that's a little bit of clearance. That way the 2 PCBs, I have no nails, so this is tough. 2 PCBs don't touch each other. There we go. And we're just gonna press it down like so over here. Will that be in the way? You gotta check these things while you're still in the building process. Alright, so, and okay, so the receiver is actually, I don't know if you're gonna be able to see in there, but the antennas connectors are actually touching the top of the plate here. So, kind of don't like that, but what I'm gonna do, the way these receivers come is the first time you boot them up, they go into binding mode. So this is good, that way you don't have to like hold the button down while you while you plug in the battery, because sometimes that's just a hassle. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take another double-sided tape and I'm gonna put it over top of the receiver. That way when the carbon fiber metal plate goes on top, it won't actually touch anything on the receiver, and we shouldn't cause a short. Everything is secured. Let's put on these 2 little washers that we printed for the top. Okay. What I did notice when I was flying is I didn't have my camera like really tight on the frame. So when I would increase the camera angle and tilt it more, and then I'd fly a pack, and then I'd look at the camera and it would be all the way down again. So from the vibration, because it wasn't tight enough, it just kind of tilted back down. Make sure your camera's on tight. All right, so at this point, we're pretty much done. That's all we had to do hardware wise. I'm gonna have to quickly update the firmware on the tracer, and then you can actually update the receiver wirelessly after you update the tracer. So that's a pretty cool thing that TBS did. And then since I have to put a new version of firmware on the actual transmitter here, so I'm gonna have to like redo all my binds. It's like all the switches, I have to bind all them to how they used to be. And then I'm gonna figure out where I'm gonna put this antenna. I'm gonna do all the software, all the Betaflight configurations, and we'll go out and fly. But for now, we're pretty much done. All we gotta do is plug in this camera, and obviously I'm not gonna put props on because it's not done. But you plug in the camera, go ahead and put the frame on and screw it on, and we're all done. All right, future me here. I decided that I'm gonna mount the other receiver antenna right over here, and that's gonna be the vertical one. So as you can see, it's mounted right over here with a zip tie. Not the best and most secure spot, but I believe that it will hold. And then that's pretty much it. That's all for today's video, I guess. Thanks for watching. But if you guys did like the video, give me a thumbs up. It'll help me grow my channel. I'm gonna be putting out a lot more videos of this sort. And yeah, if you guys, once again, the links to the TPU printed parts, if you guys want to use these in your next build, are gonna be in the video description below. I really like how this turned out with the antenna and the TPU printed parts and the buzzer and all that. So that's it. Alright guys, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.